You're about to make a fully working checkpoint and score system for your game, so your players' scores go up every time you hit a checkpoint. In the last video, we created a script that we put inside our server script service. It should look like this and say game.players.player added, connect, function, and then the function that creates our leader stats folder and our score. I'm going to go into server script service and I'm going to rename this player added, just so that I don't get it confused with any other scripts if I have multiple open at the same time. Before we change anything on our script though, let's go back to our game, click up here to open the window, and we're going to create a brand new folder called checkpoints. So go up here to where it says workspace, mouse over, click the gray plus sign, and click folder. Now I'm going to right click, go up to rename, and let's name this folder checkpoints. I'm going to use a capital C, make sure it's all one word, checkpoint. Now we can choose any part we want to make and make it a checkpoint just by putting it in this folder. So I'm going to click this spawn point because that's going to be our very first checkpoint. Put it in the folder. I'm going to click on this platform because I want that to be a checkpoint. Put it in the folder. And then over here we have our elevator platform. I'm going to put that in the folder. And then this shelf over here, I'm going to make that our last checkpoint. And the last thing we have to do over here is number them from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3. And now we want to change these parts' name to number them in order so that we can use it later. So our very first checkpoint, we're going to give the number 0, 0. Our second checkpoint, we're going to give it the number 1. Our third checkpoint, we can just click it here. We'll give it the number 2. And our last checkpoint, we'll give it the number 3. And you can add as many checkpoints as you want. You just put them in this folder and then change the number to match the order that you want it in. So your second checkpoint is going to be number 1 and your third checkpoint is going to be number 2 because we started at 0. So now let's go back into our script to see how we can make this work. So just like we added a touched listener to a part in our kill breaks episode, we're going to add a touch listener to our character so that we can see everything our character touches. And then we're going to check if it's a checkpoint, and if it is, we're going to make our score the same as the number of the checkpoint. So to attach a touch listener to our character, we actually have to use an event called character added, which is different than this player added up here. So let's see how. If I hit play, you'll remember that in our leader stats video, we kept going into players here. We'd see our character's username, and this is where we added our leader stats folder and the score. But we can also go into workspace and see our character's username there. The variable that gets created with our player added event changes anything that would show up in here. So this tends to be information about the character, its stats, its score, stuff like that. Whereas this version of our character that shows up in the workspace includes its head, the feet, the legs, all of the physical body parts and clothes of our character. It also contains this humanoid that we talked about in our kill part episode for health. And so we're actually going to want to write a script to get that. So let's start with our onCharacterAdded function, which is going to be written like this: player.characterAdded : connect, and then we put the function inside it again. So we write parentheses, function, and then the little variable it creates. In this case, I'm going to write char, which is short for character. And then in here, we're going to write whatever we want to do when the character gets added. So the next thing we want to do is get our humanoid, and we're going to store it in a variable called humanoid. So I'll write local humanoid equals char, which is our character variable, which is created from our character added function, char, wait for child, humanoid. And then we want to put a weight underneath it. This weight is just going to make it so if a player has a slow phone or a slow internet connection, we're going to wait until our character is loaded and saved in this humanoid value before we move on to the next step. And now we attach a touch listener to our humanoid, just like we did the part in our kill break episode. So we write humanoid.touch, just like we wrote part.touch, then connect, and then our function inside here. We want our hit variable. So in here we write hit, then hit enter, and now let's print out our hit statement and run the game. And so now if we hit play, it's going to print out everything the character touches. So it's printing out 0 because that's the name of the part that we're on. Click here. See, it's named 0. And so we're going to go on our stairs, which we didn't name, so it's just going to say part and part and part. And now it's going to say 1 because that's what we named our part in here. And if we went over and touched these other parts, it would say 2 and then 3. See, 2 and then 3. Perfect. So we know that we only want our score to change when the part we touch is a checkpoint. And since all our checkpoints are here as children of this checkpoints folder, we can actually say if our hit.parent is equal to workspace.checkpoints. So it's going to say, is the parent of the part we touched in this folder checkpoints? Then we want it to add to our score. In here, we're going to write a line of code that sets our hit's name. So the 0 or the 1 or the 2 or the 3 that we've named our checkpoints, it's going to set that name to our score variable that we created up here. So we write score.value equals hit from the hit variable that gets created by our touched event, hit.name. And that'll give us the name of the part we touched. So let's hit play. And so when we jump up on the checkpoint name 1, we should see our score change. And there we go. Our score has changed from 0 to 1. And if we go into our players, we go into our username, go into our leader stats, click on the score variable, we see, in fact, our value is 1. And if we go up here, see our value has changed to 2 and our value has changed to 3. But we do have a couple little problems here. So if we go back and touch our first part, our 0, you see our score has gone back to 0. And also, if we touch the bottom of this 3 part, our score instantly goes from 0 to 3. So someone could just skip to the end and get a score of 3 by just touching this part from the bottom. So we can fix that with another simple if statement inside of this one. So this checks our hits parent to make sure that it's a child of our checkpoints folder. And we also want to see if our hit.name is 1 greater than our player's score. So our score at the start is going to equal 0, and we only want our score to go up if we hit checkpoint 1. We don't want it to go up if we hit checkpoint 2 or 3, because then someone could just cheat and skip to the end. So here we write if hit.name equals score.value plus 1. So it's going to check, is this 1 greater than our current score? So when we start at 0, it's going to check if it's 1. When our score goes up to 1, it's going to check if it's 2. And only if that's true will we change our score by writing score.value equals name. So our checkpoint has to be 1 greater than whatever our score is for the value to update. Now let's hit play and see it in action. All right, so our score is 0. We're going to go over here and touch checkpoint 3. Checkpoint 3 is not raising our score right now. That's a good sign. Going to jump up to checkpoint 1, and that should raise our score. So our score didn't update because we're checking here using hit.name for the name of a part. Roblox Studio is actually reading this in as a string or as a word rather than as a number. So it's trying to see if the word 1 or whatever is equal to this number 1 or whatever the number is. So we actually have to convert this string into a number. So to do that, we write toNumber hit.name. So even though we would see this number 1 as a number every time, Roblox Studio is reading it in as a string. By converting our name from a string to a number using this toNumber function, Roblox Studio can compare the name of our part against our score's value. We also need to do the same thing down here so that we don't accidentally convert our score into a string. We want it to stay a number so that we can add to it. So hit.name in here as well. So our score is 0, then we touch platform 1, and we see our score is updated to 1. And if we jump down here and touch part 3, we see that nothing changes. But if we touch part 2, before we touch part 3, we should be able to update it properly. So touch part 2, and now when we touch part 3, it works perfectly. So right now, if we touch a kill part, we get sent all the way back to the beginning. But we can actually make it so these checkpoints change our spawn location with just one simple line of code. So let's stop it and go back to our player added script, and inside our character added function, at the very top, we can write character : move to, and then this isn't gonna make much sense at first, so I'm gonna explain it. Write checkpoints, and then square bracket, score.value, and then dot position. Oh, we have to make this workspace.checkpoints. Make sure it's spelled exactly the same here as it is over here. And so now what this is saying, let's go from inside out. This line goes to our checkpoints folder, that's workspace.checkpoints. Then it finds the checkpoint with the same name as our score.value. So if our score is 0, it's gonna find the checkpoint name 0. If our score is 3, it's going to find the checkpoint named 3. Then it's going to get the checkpoint's position, and then this move to moves the character there. And we actually want to take this line and move it down to make sure we're doing it after our humanoid loads. So we see our scores going up, and when we die, we should respawn back on part 3. So there we go. It worked perfectly. All right, and the last thing we're going to do in this video, just to wrap it up, is we're going to create a ramp so our players can get out of the obby. I'm going to click on this stair here just because it's purple and it's apart, and we already have it anchored. I'm going to drag it over to the shelf, drag it up, and we're just going to make a small platform angled up towards the top. Shrink it down, make it about 1 stud tall, drag it over. That's about a good length. Okay, before we rotate it up, let's get it into position. Gonna move it over here. Gonna move it so it's after our kill brick. And here's something really cool that we haven't done with our rotate yet. If you hit edit pivot, you can now drag the point that your part will turn on to a different side of the shape. Let's see it in action. I'm gonna drag this over so it's at the edge of our platform that we're trying to rotate. And then when I hit rotate, you'll see it's turning from this end now instead of the center. And I'm just gonna turn snap off by clicking this checkbox, and there we go. It's lined up with the edge of our wall over here. So let's shrink it down. And there we go. Now we have a way for our players to get out once they've gotten to the top of our obby. In the next video, we're gonna make an end screen that players will see once they finish and complete the obby. This is an awesome touch that makes your game so much more satisfying to win.